Lovely. Thank you for coming, everybody. This is the DPAC Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance workshop on independent living and social care. I'm Mark Harrison. I'm a member of Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance and DPAC Norfolk, and this is...
Sorry. I'm Sean McGovern. I'm here with the United Union from the conference itself. I'm also a member of DPAC and ROFA from the TUC side. And I work within it should be called the independent living sector. It's not. It's still called the social care sector. That's the sector I work within.
Okay, and our fellow presenter, Michelle Daly, is driving around Brighton, lost, doesn't know how to use Google Maps, so she'll be here any minute now, but hopefully she'll come and join us very soon. I've put up on the board an outline of what we're going to do. So first of all, we're going to, here she is, Michelle, come and join us.
Apologies. Sorry.
Do you want to say who you are?
I'm Michelle Daly. I am a ROFA member and also interim director for Life Inclusive Education, and also I'm the chair for Independent Living Alternative. I apologise for being late.
Okay, sorry, I forgot to use the microphone.
I apologise.
So, we're going to give a short presentation just to give people the background so you know where the ideas around independent living have come from. Sean's going to speak about his direct experience of working, of being a disabled person and a user of social care, but also as a welfare rights advocate for people who use social care. And then Michelle is going to talk about the theoretical constructs that make up the social model of disability and how that applies in this situation. And then we're going to break down into small groups, and we're going to ask you to think about and construct what you think a legal right to independent living and a national independent living service should look like. What should be the building blocks, the real core of it. And I say that, and it's a really live discussion because of the motion that passed through conference on Sunday, which supports a national independent living service and demands that a Labour government bring one in. But then on Monday, the announcement by John McDonnell about funding social care for the elderly through local authorities. And there's a real contradiction there. So this is going to be a workshop that has real meaning in terms of the discussions, because we need to move the Labour Party and the shadow cabinet away from that concept of social care for the elderly and employing care assistants in local authorities to go into people's houses and look after them. Away from that, back to what the disability movement has campaigned for around the 12 pillars of independent living and what that means. So the workshop will have a real meaning, and then we'll feedback. And we're having discussions in the next week with the leadership in the Labour Party on why we aren't grateful for their announcement on social care, why we think it's not a very good idea, and what we should replace it with. So I want to hand over straight to Sean. Let's start from real experience and what's happening with disabled people. I'm then going to present the basics of the ROFA vision for independent living, and then Michelle's going to talk about the social model and other stuff that goes with that. So, Sean.
Thanks, thanks everyone. Yeah, I work for an organisation called Disability Advice Service Lambeth, and I work in the direct payments team. Now, I tell the people I work with, disabled people and elderly people I work with, when they ask me what it's all about direct payments, I say, care on the cheap. I have to be honest, but I also say, if you quote me on that, I know I said it, because that's the truth of the matter, is care on the cheap. On the one hand, they pay us X amount, and on the other hand, they'll pay agencies £8, £9 an hour more. So we're actually doing them a big favour by taking on these, taking on direct payments. But to get back to the situation, I have a very good care support package, so I'm allowed to live independently. It's simply because I'm still getting my independent living fund monies paid through. They've been after me for the last 2.5 years, my local authority, Lambeth, and they haven't quite caught up with me yet. They will, but please, John over there, don't bring that John to go sake, but they will come up with me. But more importantly, the people I work with, client base for want of a better term, these are disabled people, they're people like us. They are people who want to live independently, but they're not allowed to live independently because they're getting care packages at 7 hours a week. You'll get 7 hours a week, you'll get somebody who has quite complex independent living needs, will be getting 45 minutes in the morning, half an hour lunchtime, half an hour in the evening, half an hour, or maybe 45 minutes at bedtime, whatever that means. And in the last couple of years, last 2 or 3 years, I'm getting the people I work with are phoning me up saying, sure, my money's gone down, why is that? And they get a very strange call from a social worker who asks a few questions on the phone, and that's the review. And they will cut their packages without them actually knowing about it, or they may have said something about it, but people don't fully understand why the packages are being cut. And of course, they're also employing PAs at the same time. So they've got this conflict then with the PAs and saying, well, how come where's my money? And that's happening across the piece. The other area which I think is very important, and that's the lack of understanding by a lot of people, why would they, about disability-related expenditure. Now, we've got a consultation where I imagine a lot of the other boroughs and people have opened a similar type of consultation, where they're cutting back on things like disability-related expenditure, where they give you a £25 a week, let you off for £25 a week. At the moment, clients of mine, people I work with, are paying £90 a week towards their care packages. This could go up to £125 or £135 by next April. That is the situation we are facing, boroughs. And of course, others are just having packages cut to the barest minimum. There's no such thing now as being able to go out and socialise in any sense. It's not happening. They are coercing families into taking on those responsibilities. Yet the Care Act is very, very clear on families and friends, and on whether or not, how you approach that situation. You cannot force people into having to care for relatives or friends. But people don't understand the system. They don't understand the power relationships in the system. And of course, some people look at social workers and care managers as authority figures and don't question them. It's the thing we need to be doing. We need to be teaching people the power structures within social services itself. Or not, maybe we do need to now move over to a system that isn't controlled by people at the top, people, care managers and above, people who know nothing about independent living. A lot of people are in the brokerage department, they're just money people, and they're actually making decisions that social services care managers, social worker care managers should be making. They're making those decisions, and it's simply about cutting money, cutting budgets. It doesn't reflect on people's needs whatsoever. And I think this increasingly brings us to a real need for an independent service. Sadly, it's broke. The way it's running around the moment is broke. I don't think the NHS want us as part of their brief either. I've spoken to consultants, nurses, district nurses, and when we mention the independent living service and we start to explain it, they think it's a very good idea. I mean, my story is when people say to me, well, what about me? I have illnesses. And I say, well, you don't go to your PA if you've got a chest infection to ask him or her for a diagnosis, but I don't. Similarly, if I need help dressing, I don't phone up a district nurse. They meet very, very different needs, and that's what we have to get across to the NHS, to local authority, and to John McDonnell. I don't think John McDonnell is against us. I don't think he's totally resistant to us. I think he's been pulled from different directions. By the way, I'm not here to defend John McDonnell in any way. I think we've got a fight ahead of us. It's a fight we can win. As Mark has said, what happened yesterday, for Sunday, sorry, I couldn't go to the composite meeting because my CLP hadn't moved the motion. I spoke to people who went there, and they managed to get the core values from the ROFA and National Independent Living Service document in there. So we managed to get them in there, and that's great. The sad thing is, it was compensated in with a lot of health stuff as well, which kind of dilutes it. It starts to get lost within another. It's like, you know, I know, it's like a book of short stories. You know, it's that type of thing. It's not standalone, and we need to be speaking to the Labour Party, making this a lot clearer, having standalone things. I mean, for instance, we had a discussion yesterday where we were talking about Yemen, Palestine, and Brexit. You know, it's just ridiculous. We should have them separate. Anyway, I divulged on that. Sorry, I'm going off a tangent on that one. So, yes, we do need to push for a NILS system, National Independent Living Service system. It's clearly broke what we've got. And again, this is not necessarily a reflection. I don't think we can wholly blame social workers, care managers. You know, we know it's above that, but we can apportion some blame to them in the sense that they don't have to. They don't have to say it's all about the money, and some of them do. I think some of them seem to get enjoyment out of it, sadly. I've known some social workers with a very strange attitude to the way they treat and think of disabled people and the people they work with, which is quite sad, but it's the world we live in. So I'll leave it at that. Is that about right, Mark?
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks a lot.
I think that's really important because that roots it in people's real lives, and you can see, for those of you who were here in the previous workshop, where Francis Ryan talked about, you know, people who had 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week care, and their hours have been cut down to 5, 10 hours, 10 hours, 5 hours, and some people have even lost all their social care. So we've created a vision for a national independent living service, and I'll just quickly go through what that vision is, and then I'll hand over to Michelle, who's going to talk about where it came from and why we need it. At the moment, social care is a rationed and privatised service, and the other concern that we have is with the STPs and various sustainable transformation programs and CCGs. All the talk is of joining the NHS up with social care, and we think there are real dangers in that. We think because they're not going to move social care towards the NHS model. What they want to do is to move the NHS to a social care model where 90% of the actual face-to-face provision is private and privatised, and it's based on a neoliberal ideology, not rights, not needs, so we need to scrap that. There's a postcode lottery across all local authorities. If you're a disabled person in one local authority, you can be getting a completely different service to people in the next door local authority. And there's no rhyme nor reason to it. Personalisation we want to hold on to some of the concepts around that, particularly where the choice and control lies with the disabled person. But actually, it needs to be a rights-based provision backed by law. So we need a legal right to independent living. The Care Act isn't fit for purpose and will be scrapped if our vision is brought into being. And we need to base the new system on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Disability Inquiry from the UN, including their concluding observation and the general comment on Article 19. Article 19 is a right to independent living in the Convention, and that's what we're basing our vision on. So the road for vision for a right to independent living is that we have a national independent living service paid for from direct taxation, progressive taxation. It's free at the point of delivery alongside the NHS, and we need that model, that it can't be rationed and it can't be means tested. It has to be free at the point of delivery, free at the point of need, alongside the NHS. It needs to be co-produced with disabled people and with disabled people and disabled people's organisations in the lead. It will be organised nationally, it will be funded nationally to national standards, but it will be delivered locally through disabled people's organisations, user-led organisations, co-ops and not-for-profit public sector bodies. And we will take the workforce, the personal assistants, the social care workforce, and it will be, people will have proper rights, the right to decent wages, terms and conditions, holidays, paid for travel between proper pensions and all of that. But the disabled people and disabled people's organisations will be in the lead in terms of that peer support, that peer development of the thing. We will close all residential hospitals, so-called ATUs, assessment and treatment units, for disabled people. As you know from the scandals and the disgraceful behaviour of the private sector in these institutions where disabled people are abused and tortured. When the Winterbourne View scandal was broke by the BBC Panorama 9 years ago now, the government committed to closing those institutions within 2 years. There are more people with learning disabilities and autism in those institutions today than there were when the Winterbourne View scandal happened, and we've had more since then. So I'm going to skip because I want to keep to time, and hand over to Michelle, who's going to talk about the social model of disability and a whole range of other things to go along with that. So, Michelle. Yeah.
Slides as well. I'll just take those slides more. Okay, thanks. Hi everyone. I apologise for the turn out late. As I said, I'm the chair of the International Committee and the chair of Independent Living Alternative and interim director for ALFI. So I've been asked to speak about social model of disability in the UNCRPD, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Disabled People, Article 19, and also look at the 12 pillars of independent living. So it's going to be difficult to keep to time, but I'm sure Mark will keep it to time. So first of all, let's have a conversation about disability when we're trying to explore what the social model is about. And I think what I want to do is first of all have a look at some of the questions to challenge our views. So where do we hear and learn about disabled experience? And how much has your experience influenced and shaped your thinking and understanding towards and about disabled people? And do you think about disabled people having intersectional identities or as a homogeneous group? And is your thinking about disabled people differ from ideas of pity, suffering, being a burden, helpless, etc.? And when discussing issues around injustice, policies, etc., to what extent do you include disabled people as part of your agenda? And finally, do you think of independent living as a human rights issue? Some people this topic is familiar, some people it's not. I think the key thing we're doing, do we think of independent living as a human rights issue? Most often, the prevalent way of thinking about disabled people's experience is within the context of the medical model. And the focus of the medical model is about the individual as a problem. And for us, what we talk about today is that we must reject and guard ourselves against negative influences and narratives, because these are rooted in the medical model thinking and causes segregation and discrimination of disabled people. Sadly, Mike Oliver, who passed away last year, was a lecturer disability activist. He articulated that models are a way of translating ideas into practice, and the idea underpinning individual model was the personal tragedy, while the idea underpinning the social model was that externally imposed restrictions. That's key, what he's saying. So if we look at this image, what we see is the way to understand the medical model is to think about the questions people often ask disabled people. Some of us are familiar with the room for some of this, and it's, what is wrong with you? Why are you like that? Was you born like that? Or they might ask you, what's your disability? What's the point of saying this? The point I want us to understand is how the question draws us to place an emphasis on the individual's identity, to make the person out to be a problem and an inconvenience. I think that's the key thing, that we're made to be an inconvenience and a problem. What we notice from the medical model is it focuses on seeing a personal problem and to do with the individual, and the problem needs to be cured or managed. And the key thing about cured and managed is that it's about saying that we need to go to specialist services, and those specialist services are usually away from mainstream services. So the medical model thinking is based on an idea of normalisation. So for example, the medical model thinking, if we see if a deaf child cannot learn to speak, then they're placed in a school for deaf children. Often that is away from their families and away from the communities. Yeah? So the important is to know that the medical model is about the individual. It's not about individuals with health issues, because that's a separate conversation. It is about the way society is taught and conditioned to think about people with impairments in a negative way. And I think that's the key message I want us to think about. To reject this way of thinking, around about the 60s and 70s, the social model was born. And at this point, it's important to know that it was disability rights activists that pioneered the social model of disability. One of the key political figures was Vic Finkelstein. He was born in South Africa, Johannesburg, and he became disabled. So it went too far, Mark? If you go too far, go too far. Okay. And he became disabled as a result of an accident. He died sadly in 2011 at the age of 75. And he came to the UK as a refugee from South Africa because of his affiliation with the anti-apartheid movement. He was not shy to activism. To me, I think he was one of the key guys, really. He was not shy to activism, and on arrival to the UK, he met with other political, like-minded disabled people, such as Mike Oliver, Colin Barnes, Paul Hunt, and other people who may be in the room who met him. Sadly, I didn't get to meet him. I would have loved to. It was the collective voices, and I think this is the key thing we need to remember. It was the collective voices of disabled people that set out to change the horrendous negative narrative about our experiences. They redefined the word disability to give us an identity so we can be viewed as a human being, and that's key. They argued that the problems faced by disabled people were caused by society and its failure to take account of our needs, not our impairments, and I think that's key. And I think for many people that is quite complicated. I will explain a bit more. They further crystallised our experience by using the social model to help people to think about the inequalities and injustice we experience because of society's failure, again, to recognise people with impairments. This example will help you to understand what is disability, and I think it's key because it gets quite complicated, right? So a disabled blind man is not able to enrol at his local college because the course is not doesn't have accessible information in Braille. And a disabled pregnant woman cannot access the local maternity service because the assessment furniture is not accessible. So what we're saying is it is not to do with the individual, it's the external factors. So under the social model of disability, disability is defined as, and again, it's important we get this bit as well, a loss, limitation or restriction of opportunities and rights for people with impairment to take part in society on an equal basis with others. So disability is equal to disablism in the same way if I, as a woman, is paid less for the same job as a man. This is gender inequality and gender inequality and sexism. And if I'm denied a job opportunity based on my race, it is racism. So we're now beginning to identify that disabled people can be discriminated because of their impairment, which people often don't recognise. And I think this is what we're talking about in this conversation. So disabled people are seen as disabled not because of their impairment, such as blindness or autism, but by society's failure to take account of our needs. So being disabled is part of the normal spectrum of human life, and society must expect disabled people to be there and include us. So rooted in social model is disabled people's liberation. And I think Nasa Begum, she basically articulates it quite well. You know, Nasa Begum for me was someone I met when I first kind of exposed into the movement. And what she said, it's vital we claim the social model as a tool for understanding discrimination and prejudice we face and for helping to explain our experience in society. And that's key. This takes me perfectly to our next topic, the UNCRPD, United Convention on the Rights of Disabled People. Am I right for time, Mike? Yeah, okay. So, another area that disabled people have campaigned tirelessly for is for independent living and to live independently and be included in the community. There's two bits I've just mentioned, not just independent, but to be in the community. I think that's key, be part of the community. The traditional view to take is that it places disabled people in institutions because far too often we're viewed as, on the topic of it said, a burden, a risk, costly, and also there's a lack of accessible properties, etc., etc., etc. We saw from the medical model. There is also a failure of our UK government, as Mark kind of touched on, to protect and promote independent living in respect of Article 19 and to fully implement UNCRPD in law. What is the UNCRPD and what does it do? And I think that's what we look at. So just to quickly give us an understanding, some of us don't know what it is. So the UK government ratified it in 2009, and the conventions is to reinforce our human rights protection that already exists in law, and under the Human Rights Convention are human rights. The convention doesn't really create new human rights, but what it does do, it sets out what our human rights are, it clarifies what these rights mean for specific groups, and it places an obligation on governments to take active steps to make sure disabled people can enjoy a full life. So in 2017, I say the UN Disability Committee reported the UK government as failing disabled people and causing a human catastrophe. It was a damning report. I'm not going to go into that too much because we get a lot of stories on that. We continue to see stories, Mark kind of touched on one, of home cares and hospital abuse. Most recently we saw the BBC report around the Horton Hill Psychiatric Hospital, the people with learning difficulties and upwards abuse, and there's more and more, and it's disgusting. We also saw a recent report this month by the National Audit Office on special education and needs spending. And what we found in that, one of the reasons why local authorities are overspending is because they're placing disabled people in residential institutions. And when I looked at that report, I thought, damn, they're spending up to £50,000 a year per child in an institution when they could go to a mainstream school, and £19,000. Now, come on, we don't need to go any further on that. So what we're seeing, these practice of placing people in care homes, special schools, hospitals, and all the other institutions contradicts the very essence of Article 19. Article 19, Mark. So what does Article 19 say for those who don't know? It says, state parties to the present convention recognise the equal rights, I think that's key, the other underlined key points, of all parties, of all persons with disability, to live in the community with choices equal to others. I think when we look at social service, you kind of touched on We don't have equal choices, we have options. There's a difference between choice and an option. And I think when people say people have a choice, that's a load of rubbish. We have option, bad option, and bad option, and bad option. And there's no such thing as choice in disabled people. And it's not equal. And shall take effect and appropriate measures to facilitate full enjoyment. We know that's not happening by persons with disability. I guess it's contradicting what I'm saying. If UNCRPD uses disability, UK says disabled people, of the rights and full inclusion and participation in the community. We can see lots of contradictions in that. Now let's look. Yeah, I can do that as well. Yeah. Do you want to? No, should I do it now? Okay. We can get to that. Those are the 12 pillars. Okay, right. Okay. So remember, I'm going to run right straight through to the 12 pillars. Right. Okay. So one of the things I think key really in terms of what disabled people came out by saying it's not just about dumping disabled people in the community. We're not just about saying let's get in the community and get on with it. One of the things disabled people said to make independent living important and human right is they drew up something called the 12 pillars. You got it there, Mark? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the screen.
Yeah, bring that up. So the 12 pillars, which are important to ensure that disabled people can live in the community, is appropriate and accessible information, an adequate income, appropriate and accessible health and social care provision, a fully accessible transport system, full access to the environment, adequate provisions of technical aid and equipment, availability of accessible and adaptable housing, adequate provision of personal assistance, availability of inclusive education and training, equal opportunities for employment, availability of independent advocacy and self-advocacy, and final, availability of peer support. I'm going to kind of wrap it up. I want to leave us with this. Disabled people must be recognised as equal members in society. There are two significant mottos adopted by Disabled People International: a voice of our own and nothing about us. And I hope these mottos force you and us to think deeply about the needs to include disabled people in all aspects of life. And finally, there must be a fair and decent care service for all. We must recognise independent living as a human right, because we all want freedom, we all want equal choice, and we all want to be included in the community. This is why a national independent living service is needed to resolve this country's crisis to social care. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So now we want to get you to do some work, because we said the workshop will be participative. So I've put up some questions here. We're at the Labour Party conference, we're in the World Transformed, so we want to transform the world for disabled people. You've heard what's going wrong, what restricts, what oppresses disabled people. So let's reimagine the world as transformed through socialist policies to support disabled people of all ages to meet their independent living and social care needs. So what are the essential elements to support disabled people of all ages to live independent lives? How would it be funded, and who is it for? The who is it for, just to give the context, is in the context of the commitment to the Labour Party announcements that John McDonnell made on Monday, that they're going to provide free personal care for older people in their homes. Okay. And it's not universal free care because it's still means tested. So who is it for? How will it be funded? What are the essential elements? And then in your groups, if you want to answer other questions that we haven't posed, please do. Could you just sort of gather around in small groups of sort of 4, 5, 6 around where you are, or mix it up if you want to have conversations with other people. And we've got 20 minutes for this.